Brilliant. Right. Well, thanks you all for joining us tonight. We may have a few latecomers who I will let in. Delighted to be joined tonight by Eric Steele and Rob Lovesey from Sporting Connect. So we'll start with the main man himself. No offence to you, Rob. Eric obviously has had a storied career. Has coached some great goalkeepers, the likes of Peter Schmeichel, Thomas Sorensen, Joe Hart, Edwin Van Der Sar, David De Gea, Jack Butland, and Jordan Pickford, to name but a few. And as if you were logging in on the call there, just hearing some more great anecdotes, which I'm sure we're going to have plenty more of tonight. So Eric was the winner of the Goalkeeping Coach of the Year by the FA in 2014. He won 10 trophies at Manchester United while working alongside Sir Alex Ferguson. And was also part of the coaching setup in 2017 for the England under-19s team, who won the European Championships. So a fantastic career, which we're going to delve into a bit more detail in very shortly. Rob Lovesey from Sporting Connect. Sporting Connect, we've launched a Surrey-specific job board for Surrey coaches. Rob will explain a little bit more detail about that later. But it's a great platform for volunteer and paid opportunities for coaches at any level. Also jobs in the professional game, right down to the grassroots. So without further ado, I will hand over to Rob, and Rob's going to lead the session, and I will be interjecting with any questions. We do intend for this to be quite an interactive session, so please do fire any questions into the chat if anything comes up that you'd like more information on. Or to delve a bit deeper, that's what we're here for tonight. So without further ado, over to Rob.
Cheers, James. That intro for me didn't quite live up to Eric's, did it? But, no. So yeah, everyone, obviously this is the second in our webinars that we've started to host. We had Peter Taylor a few weeks ago, so hopefully we've got a few coaches coming back to join us for tonight. I've been fortunate enough to do a bit of work with Eric before, a couple of years ago, so it's great to catch up with him again. And I know the next hour is going to be absolutely fantastic. Eric's brilliant. He's got some great stories and some really valuable insight that we can pass on to yourselves as coaches. We know we've got coaches across all levels tonight. So you can have your grassroots coaches to your academy level coaches. We're going to make sure there's enough for everyone to take away to be able to go use to help develop yourself as a coach, but also the players you're working with. So we'll get straight into it. Over to Eric. We want to learn at the start. We've got some questions that have come in advance. This week, I'm going to give a shout out to who asked the question, and we're going to just structure the evening based on those questions. And as James said, if you've got any questions that you want to throw out there on the chat whilst we're discussing, James will just interject and then just throw them at Eric, and I'm sure Eric will be able to come back and answer them as and when they come up. So it's going to be really interactive. But Eric, if you can just give us an update, really, a bit of your bio about your career. We understand you started as a player and then you went into coaching and specialising in goalkeeper coaching. So, yeah, over to you.
Well, good evening, fellow coaches, wherever you are in Surrey or the surrounding areas. I'm really looking forward to the next hour. I'm basically here for yourselves. I've always believed in sharing knowledge, whether it was as a goalkeeper or as a goalkeeping coach or part of multidisciplinary teams, whether I was with the FA or with Manchester United, Man City, Aston Villa. So the one thing I've always learned, I've never been afraid of sharing my knowledge. So if anybody wants to throw a question via the chat line, please do so. I'm more than happy to do that. And I'll probably throw one or two at you as well. Just briefly, you all know I'm a very proud Geordie, born and bred. Wallsend Boys Club, which produced over 90 professionals over the last 50 years. Bigger names than me, you would know Shearer, Beardsley, Bruce. They were the people that obviously hit the headlines. Ultimately, we had a lot more from there that have made the game. Fraser Foster was the second goalkeeper. So I left, and then during my playing career, 6 promotions. So Peterborough, Brighton, Watford, Derby. And then I was coaching just out of interest, and I'm sure one or two of the questions will come up. The one thing that I was told very early in my career that you should go and do some coaching, Steele. And I said, why? He says, it'll improve you as a goalkeeper. And I said, why is that then? They said, well, if you gain more knowledge of the game from a coach's perspective, it will certainly help you. And then when I fast tracked and think about Sir Alex Ferguson when I was at Man United, he actually said Edwin Van Der Sar was one of 4 coaches he had on the field. He thought that Edwin was a coach as well as a goalkeeper in terms of information that he gave in and out of possession. And so when I look back, I think, you know what, I didn't realise at the time how important it was. So that's what I did. So I actually had my full A license, as we call it now, by the time I was 25, which that was quite unique. Graham Taylor, bless his heart, when I was at Watford, he made a lot of the players go and be coaches, which I think put a lot of people like Kenny Jackett went out and got it. Wilf Rostron, Steve Sims, a lot of other people have gone on in the game. And then I left playing very quickly to do part-time coaching, because goalkeeper coaches in the 90s weren't full-time. So I actually then did something that I really enjoyed. I'd studied business studies while I was still playing, and I actually bought my own pub restaurant in '87. Had 11 staff full-time, which was great because I put a lot of my coaching ethos and beliefs into running a business, people business, which is important. And then I started on the road where I was doing a lot of clubs part-time. Wolves was my first coaching job, part-time. Then eventually, after I'd done part-time at Bristol Rovers, Man City, Leeds United, Huddersfield Town, Barnsley, I was doing more miles than Richard Branson. And I went full-time at Derby under the great man Jim Smith, the Bald Eagle, which was Steve McLaren's first visit to Derby. So I was part of then, which I'm sure we'll come on to, being part of a coaching team. Steve McLaren was very unique in what he tried to do by getting in a full-time masseur. So my learning curve then started because then I was introduced to psychology, which I really, really enjoyed. And thankfully I did. A gentleman called Bill Bezic, who I'd recommend you go and read. And I was lucky that he came in twice a week. So my early days, Rob, were very formed around the psych. And when I think of the people I went on to coach, Peter Schmeichel put a huge emphasis on psych. Sir Alex Ferguson, he didn't employ a psych because he'd experienced most things in life. So that really gave me a great impetus to carry on in my coaching, which I've done. Aston Villa, Man City, obviously Manchester United, where I had to deal with absolutely horrible, useless players the first year. People like Ronaldo, Giggs, Scholes, Berbatov. It was unbelievable. I thought, what am I doing here? Scholes, Evra, Ferdinand, Vidic. Oh my word! I thought, what a useless squad this is. I was actually 6 weeks. My first 6 week, Rob, I was in heaven. I thought I was dreaming, and I literally, thank God, I kept a diary. Something I recommend to all coaches. We don't do enough keeping a diary. We all talk about it within the education system, plan, do, and review. But boy, oh boy, do you need to do that? And you never know when you might need. Whether you do it on an iPad, your computer, you must keep a diary. So that ultimately led me into that. And then obviously from literally 90, I've been 22 years with the FA running the Goalkeeping A license, which I still do. We're just finishing off the last one now. So now I do webinars abroad. I do presentations abroad. I do the odd 40 days, 50 days for the FA, and just really enjoying semi-retirement. Stopped coaching on the grass to give the body a chance after battering that left leg of mine for nearly 40 years. So now, yeah, looking forward to tonight. So listen, coaches, I'm here for you at all levels. So anything you need to know, I'm sure Rob's got some terrific questions, and I really look forward to helping you in any way I can.
That's great, Eric. Yeah, we've got some questions lined up. And but something you just said then was about when you went to Watford, and it was the first time they had a structured sort of coaching team to support. So what year was that? Was that sort of the 90s, was it?
I went
late 80s, early 90s?
79. I went 79 to 84. That was when Elton John and Graham Taylor were literally not just building a team, they were building a football club. And I'm very proud to be part of that, where we ended up going into the Premier League as it is now. They'd gone fourth to first, as you know, with Graham Taylor, and with the backing of Elton John, not just in financial terms, but also business-wise. And it was a terrific time. You know, I remember when I arrived, Greyhounds were still being running around the stadium. We couldn't get on the pitch at times because they're having to dismantle all the actual starting boxes for the Greyhounds. But like Graham said, no, this will change. And you look at the stadium now and the investment they've made, and it's quite unique that I've mentioned the two names. One stands named after Graham, one stands named after Sir Alex. So yeah, there were good times, but Graham really pushed his players to go and get qualified, go and coach. So we used to all trundle off to Lilleshall in the summer And I did. I got my A licence as it is now when I was 25, along with Sam Ellis was a reserve team coach then. He was on it. Kenny Jackett, Wilf Rostrom. There was a lot of us. Les Taylor, who ended up playing in the '84 Cup final, is still at Oxford coaching. So a lot of people were grateful to Graham that he actually pushed us to do it. And again, that would have helped, Rob, in terms of the playing careers of some of the players as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of the coaches, and this came up at the Peter Taylor seminar as well. Peter being an ex-pros, he obviously knew people that helped him get into the game as a coach. We have a lot of coaches that haven't got the benefit of being an ex-professional, and that are, aspiring coaches that want to make that next step to whether it's a part-time or a full-time role. How do you recommend any sort of career progression for those sort of coaches that are looking to get noticed, essentially?
First and foremost, be a sponge. Be a student of the game. I don't believe you cannot be a coach unless, number one, you are a people person. Number two, you're prepared to continuously learn. I don't think the good coaches, the great coaches I work with, are still learning now to this day. You have to be a sponge. And I think you then have to be prepared. And you've got so much online now that you can view. What I always say is, that's terrific watching it online and viewing it, Rob. But what I would say is, why don't you take it from there, then plan your session based on what you've seen, and then start to add your little bit of individuality to it. And then be a personal coach as well as a coach. You've got to be able to interact. You can't do it without players. Excuse me. So you have to be able to be prepared to say, I need to be able to work with players individually, collectively, and then also know I'm going to have to develop people skills, psych skills to work alongside coaches, because inevitably now, you're not out on your own. Predominantly now, you're going to be working within a coaching team and setup. So be prepared to be that sponge. Be prepared to be open and listen to people. Be prepared, something I didn't do well enough in my early stages, be a good listener. I think that's vital, that you actually are, when you ask questions, be a good listener, whether it's you're asking a player or a coach or a manager. Become a listener and a sponge.
That's a great bit of insight for people. We've got a few questions about your introduction to coaching, how you got into it. So Rod Webb asked the question. He said, who inspired you the most? And essentially, why did you get into, obviously, goalkeeper coaching? I assume it's obviously because you're a goalkeeper yourself. So that probably answers that one. But yeah, who inspired you most?
Well, what I basically did, I can remember, you remember Wallsend Boys Club, where I came from, along with Peter Beardsley and Shearer, Steve Bruce, etc. I can remember when I was 14, 15, and they only had one coaching book, the FA Coaching Guide. And I remember he's still there now, Peter Kirtley, who was responsible for nearly all of these. And he actually started, when I was 14, 15, he had a book under his arm in an evening and would be on this bone-hard wooden floor at Wallsend Boys Club. And he would take me for 20 minutes before we joined the group. And I looked at him and I went, have you ever coached goalkeepers? He went, no, I'm doing it from the book. In fact, he valued the fact that even if he wrote a book along, it was better than what anybody else was offering me. And I always remember it, and I went, I'll tell you what, that is what a learning lesson that was for me, that he was prepared to put himself out. And it was Alan Wade's FA Guide to Coaching. It just literally went to page 24, right? You've got to do this, or you've got to do that. But all of a sudden, I started to pick it up, and I thought, he's gone out of his way to help me on that. And that touched me, and I still, to this day, embarrass him in front of people when we go to the dinners, reunion dinners with Shearer and everybody else. And he's still doing it now, passing on advice. So he was very much in my early stages. Then when I went on my prelim, which you would class as B license, I was on that with seasoned pros. And just to get round, and not as much on the grass, and I'm sure the other coaches will reflect on this, I was learning more in the bar at night than I was through the day. Just different stories, picking up how they'd started their coaching journey, how they started their coaching career. And then when I went to Peterborough, and Noel Campbell was the manager, who was won the FA Cup with Man United in '63. And he brought a gentleman in called John Barnwell. And John Barnwell was assistant manager, physio. He used to run on a Saturday with a sponge. He was the assistant manager, and he was also a goalkeeping coach to me. And all he was doing was, again, ringing Alan Hill, who was an ex-goalkeeper, who was at Derby, and he was literally on the phone writing down sessions to give me. So all of a sudden I thought, this is going the right way here. I'm getting fantastic tuition. And I went on to play 148 games for Peterborough. Then when I hit Watford, wow. When I hit Watford, that really come home, because then Alan Hodgkinson was my first ever goalkeeping coach. Ex-England international, found Schmeichel for Sir Alex Ferguson, and he came in once a week. And it was the best day I had. And he was my main inspiration in terms of going down the path of the goalkeeping coaching. But even then, I was still coaching teams, which is what I think helped me as I've gone on in my career, that I was doing my work as a goalkeeper. Then I was seeing the work that Alan was doing with me as a goalkeeping coach. But then I was going and putting, like you did, a lot of practices I put on my 2 nights a week for the team in Berkhamsted. They were literally what I'd done under Graham Taylor and John Ward. It was a record with a little bit of Steele's input. So that was really where my first inspirations come from, like 18 to 25.
So yeah, for example, so you're spending time doing the goalkeeper coaching, but at the same time you're learning a hell of a lot from doing the sessions with the teams as well. I guess that's where you learn about the psyche you're talking about. And you mentioned something really interesting yesterday about profiling. Yeah. How you learn about profiling players and how that's really, something really important. And so if you can share a bit of insight into profiling, because I think that'd be a really good takeaway for grassroots coaches like myself or coaches of any level.
Well, what I'll ask the guys on the chat line, what does this mean to you all, guys? I think you have to fail sometimes to succeed, and see what you say, what you think about that. So I think you sometimes have to fail to succeed within your coaching career. So just think back now individually and put a little bit of response on the chat line, and James will pick that up. Profiling, that was basically something that I wasn't realizing I was calling that when I really got to Aston Villa and started doing set plays against. And what we do now, right through the England setup, from the juniors right through to 21s and seniors, profiling is basically when the squad comes in, the goalkeeping coach now at England level is responsible for saying, right, you have to look after the set plays against. So what we do is we profile every player within the squad. It would then go onto the computer. So at 16s level, that would be on the computer right through. So for example, we'd ask 4 questions. And this was me getting to know the players as well as the goalkeepers. So you might be Ryan Sessegnon 3 years ago. And Ryan Sessegnon would come in before we go off to the final and say, right, Ryan, are you a marker? Are you a first contact marker? Are you a zonal defender? Do you like being on the edge of the box or staying up front? Because otherwise, if you don't do that, you try to drop them into the old one, square peg round hole. Ryan Sessegnon readily admitted he wasn't a marker. He could do the zonal, but he was happier being in and around the edge of the box where he could utilise, break up the attack, but also be helpful on the counter.
Yeah.
You then have people like Trevor Shalabar who would turn and say, I'm a first contact marker. So you can imagine, coaches listening, it was a great way to actually start to get some dialogue going with not just the goalkeeper, but also the outfield players. So you'd have a squad of 20 players. Now that would be, for example, used by all the coaches. So when I'm doing the 20s, under 20s, we'd had 3 players went up from our group. So Tom Davis, who's at Everton, he went straight up to 21s. Ryan Sessegnon jumped up. So the first thing Tim Dittmer does is ring me. They're away in Bulgaria somewhere, and he says, Steele, can you send me the profile of these 3 players? Morgan Gibbs-White, who's at Wolves, Ryan Sessegnon, and Tom Davis. I went, yeah, no problem. So that knowledge had been transferred to a computer, simple process, looked at it. Boy, oh boy, did I get to know players better so that we're putting people in the right places. And then Tim literally send them the link. There you go. He's a marker. He's a edge of the box. Tom was always near post space, vital to a goalkeeper, vital to a coach. Ryan Sessegnon on edge of the box. Morgan Gibbs-White was a marker. He was happy. He enjoyed the rumble of the old 1v1. And that was how we built that up. And that's what England have done within the DNA over the last 6-7 years. And it's been successful when you look at the success they've had defending set plays. Yeah, it's the same, Rob, for doing attacking set plays.
Yeah. So that little basic profiling, slotting them into those 4 groups, sort of helps you structure whether it's defending or attacking. I remember you told me a great story about Van Persie when he first came to Man United, when it came to defending corners.
You've got a great memory, Rob. Well done. Tick VG, top of the class. Yeah. Robin Van Persie was built like a brick chicken, 6'3", magnificent shoulders, was a gym animal, and he came to Man United. And of course, as soon as he's come in, he started getting involved, which they all do. Is end of session, you might want to do some extra stuff. So we used to do individual. So Rennie Moulenstein might take the midfield players. I might take defenders someday. But I'd Robin Van Persie, Giggsy, and Wayne Rooney. So first week, I said to Robin, I said, we've got the first game coming up. Corners against. What do you do? He says, oh, Steele, no way, I am not a marker. I says, hang on, look at you. You're 6'3", you've got your battle, you're prepared to elbow, put your elbow in. No. Ring Ricey, ring Pat Rice. So I rang Pat Rice, who I played with at Watford. Straight away, Pat Rice confirmed, Steele, he is not a marker. He's hopeless as a marker. And he'll tell you that. I said, right then, go on then, Robin. Where would you prefer to be? So I didn't even realize, I'm profiling, aren't I? He said, Steele, put me near post space. I'll head everything for you. I'll clear it. And I'll still try and support if we get the ball up the other end. Because we'd always leave somebody with pace. In my role, we never left. We never brought everybody back. We always saw transition, counter-attack and vital. Yeah. Especially if you're at Man United. So we'd leave Chicharito. Or we'd leave Rooney up there. We would always leave somebody up there, Danny Welbeck. So Robin slotted in the near post. He saved us in his first season. Not only scored 20-odd goals and won the Premier League, he saved us 5 points from his the clearances that he made near post, but also dropping onto that near post if the ball went over him. He stopped goals on the line.
And covering it.
Yeah. And in the end, Robin was delighted because there was a happy player, happy to sprint back, get into space. Edwin knew straight away. Great relationship with him. And then we had very, very similar when Robin Van Persie, obviously you knew David Haya come in. David straight away, don't worry, you got Robin in there. Now you try getting the ball over Robin Van Persie, either in swinging or out swinging. It was a difficult job, especially when you have that extra quiff of hair on the top. He looked a bit bigger as well.
So as a goalkeeper coach, are you responsible for profiling and working with your goalkeeper to work out what defenders are where, or is that with a defensive coach? Would you be feeding into that?
I'd be, in England level, I was always working with the defensive unit, but at Man United, I was very much involved in the defensive side. So under that was an unbelievable, because bear in mind, people didn't realise in 2008 when I went in, it was a complete new coaching team. Carlos Queiroz had left, gone off to be Portugal national coach. So Mick Phelan was moved up to assistant manager. René Moulenstein was moved up to first team coach. And I came in fresh 2008. So it was a complete new team. And that was when we really did start to individualize the roles of those 3 people. So Alex, no input in the coaching, none. All he did was he would come and view. He very rarely missed a session. And he would have
what did he just empower you, trusting every faith in you to go and do the job and just leave you to it?
Delegate straight away. Like his big phrase was, what's the point of me appointing Mick, you and Rennie, when I give you the job and I delegate you the job as assistant manager, first team coach, goalkeeping coach, doing some of the defending, if I'm going to then check on everything you do every day? You're here because you're good enough. And if I pull you back in this office, it's because you're not good enough. So make sure you don't. Get on with your job. And that was the trust that he had within his staff. And that's probably why his big belief was, a bit similar to Shankly, you have to change your staff or your players, playing staff, 2, 3, 4 years. You have to sense, you have to smell it. And that's what the great managers do. You have to smell it, Rob, when it's time to change. And how many times did Sir Alex get criticised wrongly and was proved correct when he let people like Jaap Stam go, Kanchelskis, Mark Hughes? The list is endless. People went, what's he doing letting them go? See what he brought in a replacement. And in the end, that was the nature of the man. Queiroz left, next one. Brian Kidd, Archie Knox, Brian Kidd, Carlos Queiroz, Steve McLaren. Think of the coaches he had. He didn't just sit for 27 years with the same coach. He wanted people. He did not want yes men.
Yeah.
Something that I would ask the coaches again. If you're going to work and you're a head coach or you're an assistant, you don't really want people around you that are going to keep going, that's good. You need people. And the way with the gaffer was, he wanted challenge. He wanted us to challenge him. And that was that was laid out very quickly. So there was all these different roles that Mick, Rennie and myself, we got on with it. We'd have our meetings in the morning with the doc and the usual the sports science fitness guys. We'd plan the week. The whole week would be planned. My week was always planned, Rob, whereby when I got to Friday, I used to work backwards. I used to say, right, by the time I get to Friday, have I covered the technical aspect? Have I covered the tactical aspect? Have I done some psych? Have I covered the opposition? And you literally work back and go, so Friday morning you go, I might need to do a little bit more on that. Have I covered the importance of what the team needs from the goalkeeper in this particular game? You know, and that really is how I said it. But, you know, this was before we used all these periodizations, micro, macro cycles. Coaches have been planning weekly, monthly for years. So it's not something that's come new. It's just the names and the terms have changed, Rob.
Yeah. So in terms of the names, you turn up at Man United, you're now empowered to go away by Sir Alex and, you know, do what you need to do. Then you meet Edwin Van Der Sar, for example. I take it you've never met him before. So as a coach, there'll be a lot of goalkeeper coaches on the call tonight that might be joining new clubs for pre-season. It's a unique relationship between yourself and an individual as a goalkeeper, or you know, 3 individuals that within a club if they're goalkeepers. How do you approach that to build that rapport?
I did a presentation for an online company, GK Nexus, 2 weeks ago, and the presentation was geared around the personalities. How did I deal with the different personalities during my coaching career? And what I actually got down to, Rob, was I go back to my days, and this will answer your question, reference Edwin, and it'll help the other coaches as well. I'm a big believer that you have to learn. You have to be prepared to learn the psych. So no matter how old the coaches are that are listening tonight, if you're young coaches, grab it. Get involved, read what you can about psych, dealing with, because the psych is the biggest part. It's what makes the good the greats, the strong personalities. So what I was lucky enough when I met Bill Bezic, I very quickly then got to the point that, and it helped me right through my career, you're either introvert, extrovert, agreeable. You're definitely self-aware, which was Schmeichel. Self-aware. He knew exactly what he needed to do personally for himself, but also for the team. People used to see Peter always screaming, ranting, arms going. Trust me, he knew exactly what he was doing, because all he was doing was he was totally self-aware of what he could do in his own performance for the team. Edwin was more agreeable. Edwin was the one that you'd want, because people would go to him. Huge respect for him.
Yeah.
The big thing I learned, and again, I'd pass on to coaches listening, the best thing I ever did when I dealt with the greats, people like Schmeichel and Edwin, my first morning or afternoon it was with Edwin, was, what do you need? And I always remember the response. Edwin looked at me and he went, nobody's ever asked me that. I've worked with Ajax, Juve, Fulham, and I've got on with coaches. And I said, but Edwin, you're 37. What do you need?
Yeah.
How would you think? How much improvement do you think I can give you during the next 2 years? And he went, 1%, 2%. Brilliant. Okay. Where do you think we can get that 1%, 2%? And he gave me an answer. So just by asking, what do you need? He was very much on board. Peter Schmeichel couldn't believe it. When I asked him at 37, he said, Steele, why are you asking that? Everybody always wants to change. Why do you come out like a big star with the big arms and the big legs? Why do you always shout at people? I said, why would I want to change? The success you've had in your career, why would I want to change you now? Again, what do you need? And he was at the stage of his career, Rob, where he did not need to train every day because of the physicality. He was carrying acute injuries that needed nursing, so he needed a very, very careful on and off the field structure. What do you need? I don't need to do all of this when they do that. Thursday morning, I like to do this and that. Friday, he always thought he was an outfield player. He wanted to do the boxes, the rondos. Fine, go and have some fun. Go and have some fun. You'd enjoy it, because you knew match day, he was an animal, absolute animal for the team. So that was a lot of the reasons that I found. And I think it's very important for coaches listening. Don't be afraid to ask players, what do you need? You know, we always talk about Brian Clough, the old-fashioned way, where he used to say to players, yeah, go on. So what do you need? Okay, I'll listen to you, but then you're going to do what I tell you. I think that's gone now. I talk to the top, when I speak to top coaches, look at Klopp, look at the rapport you can see that he has with players. And we can't, there's a big phrase now, and there's a lot of managers I've listened to, and they say, they're right, we can't do it as coaches, guys, without the players. So why you want to start getting it in 1v1 fights, arguments, whatever? You need the players as a coach, as a team.
Right, Eric. I know we've got into our conversation, so I've dodged a few questions here. So let's go recap and just get back on track. So I know Oliver Saunders, So you've worked with some of the world's best GKs, standout traits. You've talked about that with the psyche, what makes them successful. So you do believe it's that psyche and that makes them stand out compared to other keepers you work with.
What else? The winners. They've got this winning mentality. I go to Man United. If we're going to go out, so I've dealt with Schmeichel, Edwin, De Gea, Hart, Mart Poom, Lee Grant, Lee Camp. You go through them all. I'll tell you what. Have a look what they've always been. They've always been winners. And
how do you coach? How can you coach that winning mentality? Are there any tips you can pass on to coaches to try and ingrain that into their players?
Yeah, winning mentality comes from the mind, from in here. It comes from in the heart and the mind, and you sometimes have to nurture that with certain players and say, right, okay, in order for you to get where you want to be, we're going to have to work at your game. What do you think you need? Again, back to it. What are the areas? I never talked about weaknesses when I dealt with players. I always talked about areas to improve. So straight away they're on board. I'd say, look at the good points. I'd reinforce. It's very easy to reinforce when they've played well. But what I found is that I'd turn around and say, no, where's the areas for improvement? So you'd continue to work on the strengths on a percentage, and then you'd work on the areas for improvement. But the vein that goes through them all, like a blood vein, is this winning mentality. They wanted to win. And it wasn't, Rob, just match day. If you went into a session at Man United, Man City when I was there, I'll tell you what, training was fierce. Training was really committed.
So now, would you try and encourage that at training then? That kind of competitive nature?
Yeah, I think that that's when it comes from the top. You know, I'll go back to Sir Alex, the great man. I think there's only 2 times in the 5 years I was there he stepped in. One of the time he just stopped the session, and Rennie and Mick looked, and we all, what's happening here? You know, normally he'd be walking around and be having a phone in his ear and he'd be talking to somebody, and then he'd be watching, and he just stepped in one day and said, tempo, nowhere near good enough. Get the tempo back. We're going to such and such on Saturday. You play as you are when I'm watching here. I'll tell you what, you'll not be in the team. You'll not be in the team. And he just said that, and he stepped in. And that impact, it was only 30 seconds, Rob. Wow. Rennie and Mick could have done another 2 sessions that wouldn't have got the impact that he had in 20 seconds. Yeah. Now, sometimes that's what you need. And that's the skill of the coach. When, where, and how. Back to it. Be a sponge, be a listener. Be prepared to know when, where, and how you're going to dip in. When you need to do something within a group. When do you need to do something individually?
And I suppose you don't want to be that coach that does it regularly, because it loses the effect, doesn't it? So you want to pick that moment precisely.
Yeah, it's like in any relationship. Don't be predictable. For me, as a coach, you can't be predictable. And again, another good lesson for all the coaches, and if they want to actually, again, come back at me, and I'm happy on the chat line, is that the one thing you do is, I don't care whether you're dealing with grassroots level or whether you're dealing with top players, international players, you must be prepared, you must be planned. You cannot turn up off the cuff. And if you're dealing with 9-year-olds, we talked about it yesterday in our preview call with James, Rob. If you've got a group of 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds, their attention span is like 10, 15 seconds. Yeah. If you have planned progressions to make it enjoyable, to make it a learning experience, whose fault's that? That's the coach. If you are then dealing with top players and you are going and you have not been prepared, they will eat you alive. Young kids won't. But again, I'm back to it. Same principles, whether you're dealing with foundation, youth development phase, or professional. Be prepared. Make sure you know something we don't do. How many of you coaches listening tonight review your sessions? And if you do, who do you review them with? There's a question. So they can get James on the chat line. I'll be very interested to know who you review them with and when do you review. That's important, because otherwise, if you're not prepared to look at yourself, Rob, so if I'm walking off, you're the assistant manager, I'll say to you, how do you think that went this morning? You go, do you know what, first 20 minutes was all right, but I got the overloads wrong on the next 10. I said, you know what, I thought you were all right, I thought you did okay. Let's go and watch the video. Okay, let's do after lunch, off you go. Now, if you're grassroots, you might be doing that as you walk off. And you might ask one of the parents, get permission, video part of the session. Plan, do, review. Vital, vital. Whatever level you're coaching at in the modern era.
We've got I don't know if that's a question coming, James.
Just a couple of comments. So Murray says that he reviews with MDT.
Yeah.
And Mike says he reviews for 5 minutes with his assistant at the ground, and then via an internet chat with his assistant later that evening.
Brilliant. But it's at least they're doing it. There's a process. So within your work, your setup, I don't mind how you do it. Some people do it over a cup of coffee. If you're in the pro game, that's why they're all, when they go home, they're all going Larry, because they've had about 6 cups of coffee by the time they get to the end of the day. And the poor wives and kids suffer when they get home because they're still flying. But ultimately, it's a conversation that has to be had. I don't think you can improve. I think it's something that we've talked about in England level. We don't do well enough. Something I didn't do well enough. But I have learned that the process of doing that review is vital to how you're going to set up your next session.
Yeah. Do you get another question?
No, I was just going to say that sort of links nicely. I think we've got a comment to that effect here. So if I can just pull it up. Come on, and this is about about the sort of the self-review. So Mike said you learn more when things don't work. You reflect more on failure, and if you win, you accept it and move on with less reflection.
Yeah, I think you do the same.
Well,
the balance has to be there. I never ever believed on a Saturday night that we played as well as we thought or as badly as we thought. So by the time we come, that's why I'm not a big believer of after the game where you storm in the dressing room. I think them days have gone. I think you need a reflection, but I don't think that should come from 2 or 3 people. I think it had to be agreed. And that again is your agreement within your MDT or your coaches. Right, when we go in at half time, who's going to speak? Who's going to talk about 3 things in possession we're doing well, 3 things out of possession? Steve McLaren used to come in half time and go, guys, this is what we've got to do to win the game. This is also what we've got to do so we don't lose the game. Players like that, bullet point, boom, bullet point. They didn't want the rants, the raves. The modern day player now certainly needs, they're cute. 15 minutes is a long time. I don't know how coaches feel. Arsene Wenger always said 15 minutes was the worst rule. Yeah. He never said a word. He never went near the dressing room for 10 minutes. He would go in with about 4 minutes to go and go boom, 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 bullet point. So half time is vital, agreements between coaches, as is full time. So this again is back to your planning, making sure. So if us 3 are working as a team and Rob's the head coach, James, and you're more geared with the defensive side, you'd probably start with you and say, James, have we got to put anything right? Steely, set plays, everything all right? Boom, boom, boom. Then you would go into, okay, with the ball, this is what we did. Then you would wrap it all up. So who was the final message delivered by? Head coach.
Yeah, and Murray actually sort of says there's a bit of planning maybe going into that, and he goes about it by planning the halftime review with his staff. Brilliant.
I think that again we're back to it. You know, to be successful, you've got to have that cohesion. And if it's Pep Guardiola, you know, I've been and seen Pep work at Barca and at Man City. You watch him work, he is the main man. But his coaches know that. But every now and then he'll actually say, I want part of the session, I want you to take them away and work with them. Then come back in. But he is the driving force on the key times in the week. Coaching staff know that. Why would you want to go against somebody who's done that, whether he's at Barca, Bayern or Man City? So you've got to find that role and you've got to find that understanding. That's why a lot of the foreign coaches go literally with the staff that they've had for a long time. So when they land on foreign soil, they haven't got to get to know another 3-4 members of staff. They've brought 3 or 4 people in who know we've got to hit the ground running because 3 of you might have to learn the language. So we need to know that we can get on with it.
So Eric, in terms of that planning then, that 15 minutes at half time, would you be looking at recommending first 5 minutes between the coaches? You have your own sort of plan and you gather your thoughts. 5 minutes then with each coach, just going through the bullet points, and then 5 minutes at the end wrapping up from, you know, the manager or the senior coach, just to emphasise what they're going to go out and do.
Very much so. Great point, Rob. And also, James, from your coach education within Surrey FA or whatever FAs I've worked with, I think there's an importance of actually saying, right, the delivery, sometimes leave the players for that first 5 minutes, but have a member of staff, might be the physio who's in there, and he's just hearing, is the captain took a bit of order? Has somebody said something? Let the players sort it out. Let them have some ownership. And it's not a secret. You'll say to them, guys, first 5 minutes, come on, let's see what you've got to offer. And then, but you'll have a physio who's in there, And you might be saying, like, just nip back and go, do you know what? Players thought we were poor on turnover. We didn't switch on. Boom, poor. Where was it? Back forward, too high. All of a sudden, great. Now, if that info goes back, then you can say, right, guys, you've recognised it yourselves. You've all of a sudden got a great understanding and rapport going with your team. As long as they know, final word should be head honcho.
That's great. I've got a slightly different question here, and actually, as someone who, I mean, I'm not involved in coaching myself, and sort of look at the elite game, almost bemused at what a difference it makes, and that's kind of the issue of confidence. And Andrew said, if you have any advice on working with players who've maybe lost their confidence. Because it's so important.
Is that quite timely, Eric, to also mention Scott Buchanan? Yeah. What did you think of Roy Keane's comments about David De Gea? So, talking about confidence and errors.
I can tell you now, it won't knock David De Gea's confidence, whether it's Roy Keane or President Trump. David De Gea will be totally focused, ready for tomorrow night. My comment reference that was, I think it was harsh, the treatment. That's Roy's way. For me, there's a better way. He knows he's made a mistake. He knows he's made an error. And that won't affect David. He'll move on with that. Confidence-wise, that's something that you have to build over different stages, different ways. Sometimes you have to say to players, so what did you feel in that moment? Well, back to review, nearly always. So when you're doing your review, you say, okay, I'm just going to pick out 4 or 5 clips. Tell me what you see there. Now, sometimes the player isn't seeing what the coach is seeing. And that sometimes is the problem. So there has to be that link. Now, by just pulling up 4 or 5 clips or saying to the player, look, this is you when you were playing at your highest level. What did you do? Write it down, come back to me, we'll discuss it tomorrow. Process begins. So you slowly. Right. Yeah. What can we then do in training that's going to help you get back to some of your first time passing being slicker? Thinking forward as opposed to squaring back. Well, that session we did such and such. Coach then says, hang on, I'll bring that up. Brings the session up. Would you like to do more of that? It might be an individual, all of a sudden, a technical error that's been, I need to work on my first touch. Terrific. We'll work on that. These are all the different vehicles that you have. Some of the best ones, the best reassurance you can give players, if you're my player, Rob, is 2 visual and verbal. So you talk to them, but you need to back it up with some visual evidence. And look at all the different means you've got to do in that now. You know, with your phones, your tablets, your computers, YouTubes, whatever. That really is how you have to learn how to build that confidence.
So do you mean visual of the player themselves, or where they've been performing at a high level to reinforce that?
Yeah. If Robin Van Persie all of a sudden thinks he's not hitting the back of the net, I just got the analyst and say, give me his best 10 goals he's scored for Man United. Bang. Robin, just go and have a look at them and come back to me. Right, what did you do in there that you didn't do on Saturday when you missed it from 8 yards? I'll tell you what, Steele, I didn't look early enough. Brilliant. And it's actually a running blind. Boom. All of a sudden...
I'll ask a question from our fellow grassroots coaches. So if you're not fortunate enough to have visuals on hand on YouTube of our star strikers scoring his 30 goals a season, any tips?
Yeah, walk them through it. If you've got little Johnny and David playing up front, you walk them through and say, come on, let's just come with me. This is what we did 2 weeks ago. He played you in there. How did you finish it? Oh, I hit the ball across the goalkeeper and went in the far corner. Okay. What have you been doing recently? Well, I've been lifting my head up probably a bit early. Yeah. So when the ball's gone past you, what did you do when you scored? I kept my head down. Right. Okay. Let's go through that 3 times. Play. Boom, boom. Repetitive practice. Back to you coaches again. Make sure you have good repetitive practice. I see a lot of coaches do repetitive practice, Rob. It's not good repetitive. You have to make sure that you're getting it tactically. If you're doing and preparing your sessions correctly, you should have some form of tactical element within the technical. And that can be very easily what I've just said. If your striker's through on an inside right channel and he's scored by hitting it across the goalkeeper, you're tactically saying to him, where's the biggest part of the goal?
Yeah.
However, you then say to him, but if the goalkeeper cheats and he covers that side, where are you going to look to hit then? Hit the near post. Brilliant. Tactical. If you are then looking at the goalkeeper as you've had a great first touch and you see the goalkeeper doing like a lot of the foreign do, the goal low, where are you going to go now? Well, I might chip him. There we go. Tactical as well as technical. You might then, Rob, the next part of your session might be, this is how to dink a ball over a goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Technical elements. And it's good repetitive practice where it's fun. James
James is back. Sure,
I'm back. I was just going to sort of go into around the confidence side of things, and Mike's got a nice tip. Mike's a grassroots coach, and he just says he reminds his players of their best moments and how great they were, and asks them to describe that moment to him in as much detail as they can remember. And maybe that's quite a good idea, especially for the younger players.
Yeah. Do you know what we used to do when I first started Derby with the academy? It was a school of excellence. We used to say to the goalkeepers and the strikers, we didn't have YouTube and everything then, and I'm not going that far back before you start laughing at my age. I'm talking about the 80s. We actually turn around and say, I tell you what then, you watch your mums and dads get newspapers? Yeah. There used to be all these magnificent pictures of players, and it would be a goalkeeper making a save, or it might be Alan Shearer scoring past Schmeichel, where he's volleyed it in the top corner, and they've actually got it. The still picture is Shearer with his toe down, knee over the ball, head down, and the ball going on the top corner. So it said to strikers, go on then, get round the papers, and when you come back Tuesday night or Thursday night, bring me some pictures of what you thought was the best goals, the best techniques. Keepers, show me the saves that they had in the papers. That was early days. Now you can turn and say, go on then, tell me the best clips on Match of the Day or Sky. They come back with it. Yeah, but when you come back, don't just tell me, I thought that was a great goal or that was a great save. What we're going to ask them? I'm asking you guys now. What would you ask them? I want to know why.
Yeah, why? Can you demo it yourself? That's it.
Why was it a great save? Why was it a great goal? Why was it a great tackle? Why was it a great covering position when the ball came in the box? And you get the kids then involved, and all of a sudden they're buying into the process. This is what they do abroad. This is what they do. David De Gea, when he went to Atletico Madrid, he was a striker. And I asked him, I said, in your first 6 weeks, what was the things that stuck in your memory when you went in? He says, they taught me support play and distances. And I went, what? 12 years? Yeah. I said, you didn't do any hard? No. I had to learn the best positions I had to take in possession, out of possession. That's a 12-year-old boy. There's the Spanish way.
Wow.
Yeah. We wouldn't. What would you have done? We'd have gone, right, I know I'd have done it. If I'd had him as a 12-year-old, right, get in there. I'm going to, what's your hand position, head position? That came after. They needed him to very quickly learn what is your role within the team.
And that, I guess, Eric, now you see like Edison, he effectively just plays that sweeper role, doesn't he? And he starts, moves off. Yeah. Pretty much nearly got an assist the other day against Arsenal. Yeah. It's unbelievable how it's changed. Have you had to adapt throughout your career with those changes coming in from overseas?
Here we go. Goalkeeper changes. What's affected goalkeepers in the last 20 odd years? Right, number one, the ball. 2001, Nike produced the ball that travelled 1 yard quicker over 20 yards than any other football. So that was the beginning of the new dimension of equipment. Pitches have improved. Look at the pitches they play on now. That ball zips around quicker than ever. Nutrition is way, way ahead of where it was 25 years ago. Speed of the game. Transition. We get the Champions League final, having beaten Arsenal. Sorry if any Arsenal fans there, but they'll remember it. Transition, 10.5 seconds from our box to Arsenal's box to score. Didn't get that. And they expect referees, Rob, and linesmen to keep up with Ronaldo. Good luck. How on earth can you physically keep up with him and try and go offside, whatever? That's why they brought VAR out, because the speed of the game. Too much for the referees, the speed of the game. So all of these things have changed. Equipment now for goalkeepers. The rules, 4-step rule, back pass rule, all these have changed. So we've had to adapt as coaches. I had to adapt as coaches. So I would say when I was a coach early 2000s, I'd be a 50-50 split on working with the hands, working with the feet, both technically and tactically. As I go into my latter stages of my career, where I'm working with Edwin and David, and then back to Derby with Lee Grant, I would say it was more 60 on the actual possession with the feet and then 40% with the hands.
Yeah. So were you, as goalkeeping was evolving, were you getting direction from Sir Alex to adapt, or were you going to Sir Alex suggesting, right, we need to start looking at playing a different style in terms of our goalkeeping now?
No, that was already done. We'd done that as a staff. We had great coaches in Mick and Rennie. We were moving. We had players. What we did there, if you think about it, in my 5 years, we had strikers like Tevez, Rooney, Berbatov, Ronaldo, and Chicharito, all totally different. We had to change the way we play when they were in the team. Chicharito, terrific in behind people, on the shoulder. Van Persie could give him the ball. Edwin could throw a ball into Robin when he was tightly marked. Took us 2 months to realise we had to give Robin the ball. We kept saying, Robin said, he says to Michael Carrick, he knew, he said, why don't you give me the ball? He said, well, you are tightly marked. He said, don't worry, give me the ball. Berbatov, you could throw a ball into Berbatov. He was never going to run in behind, but he was terrific in terms of bringing people into play. Tevez, strong as a bull, backed into people, turned people on the edge of the box. We had to, so in the end, that's just the strikers. Then think what we did in terms of introducing more attack-minded fullbacks. When Gary Neville retired, how do you replace Gary Neville? We had the 118 twins, didn't we? We had Fabio and the other one. So in the end, they're then slotted in at right back, or John O'Shea or Wes Brown, different type players. Patrice Everett, more attack-minded.
So I guess it goes back to, like you said, with Van Persie, that example. It took 2 months to realise that just playing to his feet. But it's that communication and knowing how to get the best out of that player and what they need, I guess, going back to that original sort of point you raised. Eric, I'm just conscious that some of the questions, we're coming towards the end of the session. I want to make sure we get as many questions from the coaches as possible. So
I've got one, if I can just
go for
come
it.
in with one of them. Because this goes down a slightly different angle. We talked about the sort of the specialised training, and this is potentially a problem for a lot of grassroots coaches. Neil says he coaches a grassroots under-13s team with only one goalkeeper, and he's wondering if you have any ideas of how you could integrate keepers into sessions. So I guess whole team sessions, just with one keeper.
Yeah, let him join in the initial warm-up, and think about start with a team and finish with his individual work. A lot of people do it the other way around. They try to get the goalkeeper worked for 20 minutes, then join in with the team. Include him in the team from the start. If you only got one goalkeeper, number one, you've got to look at the fact that you don't want to get injured during the course of the session. So do the predominant part of your teamwork in the early part of the session. Then think about the actual technical development of the goalkeeper at the end. So then he's involved from the start.
Especially if you're Eric, what if you're a coach on your own though? So you haven't got the opportunity to go off with the goalkeeper one-on-one and give him that 20 minutes at the end.
Yeah. One of the dads. The father of the goalkeeper, or one of the dads. Anybody interested in just doing 15, 20 minutes to try and just help the young goalkeeper? He's the only one we've got. And get the dads involved. As long as the father of the goalkeeper's given permission, do a little bit at the end. The dad might do it, or one of the other dads might join in. I've often had dads help me in terms of that, where I've said, right, I just want to do some teamwork. Can you just look after them for 10 minutes? Whatever you want to do. That's why you see a lot of the level 1, level 2 now goalkeeping awards are done by parents. Dads wanting to be goalkeeping coaches just to help the kids. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Right, Eric. A couple of questions on young players as well. So Matthew Corey, do you feel elite players have too much too soon? E.g., sports science, support psychology, performance stats, etc. Does all this kind of risk causing damage long term?
I think sometimes, we can throw an awful lot of information. Obviously, talking pro game, there's a lot of information out there that you have to really. I go back to my famous triangle we had at every club I was at: player, coach, parent. So young players, you should involve the parent in the process, so the parents fully understand why is he being asked to do this on the nutrition side? Why is he being asked to do this on the actual sports science side? Why is he being asked to forgo education then when he should be doing more working with the team or individually? So I think certainly with young players, you've got to involve the parents in the process, because with the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, if you're working young players going in at top level, they'll get that backup and support anyway. But what they have to do is be prepared to ask questions as well. And that's where I think if it's the parent, they ask the parent, they ask the coach. Again, like I ask the coaches, you be learners and listeners. I think good young players do that the same. Derby, you've got a young boy now called Sibley who scored hat-trick at Millwall Saturday. You listen to that kid when he's interviewed, and I know him within the academy, he's constantly asking questions. Why do you want me to do this? He's got this inquisitive mind that he wants to learn, and he's getting a lot of things thrown at him. But when he goes on the pitch, he performs. But he tends to, he grades himself virtually through the week. I must ask, why would I need to do that? Can I do this better? Back to being a listener, a learner, and a sponge.
Yeah, sponge, like you said at the start. Yeah, so players and coaches. Mike Nicholson had a question. If you could be successful in coaching just one skill or attribute for a young player, what would you choose?
As a young, hang on, as a coach?
As a coach, you're coaching a young player, and if you had to focus or just choose one attribute to focus on, what do you think is the most important one?
Planning. Make sure you plan. Make sure you plan again for them sessions where you've got individual tactical, you've got technical, tactical.
Oh, no, if you're coaching a young player, so what would you focus on with the young player?
I'd focus on making sure he enjoys it, making sure it's enjoyable, but he's also gaining something from the sessions. I see a lot of young coaches where they throw sessions together and actually turn around and say, well, what do you think they got from that? Go and ask them. And actually say, you know what, we didn't get a lot from that. Because did you plan? Did you actually progress the session on? So I think, again, with younger players, you've got to make sure that you're planning, you're progressing, and you're making it enjoyable. And sometimes you've got to tactically test them. We don't tactically test our players in this country early enough. When I get asked a lot of the time, when do you start game appreciation? When he walks through the door at 8, 9 years of age, that's when you start game appreciation. If it's a 2v2 or a 4v4, 3v3, game appreciation begins. It's not all about the technical. Okay.
Any examples of game appreciation at such a young age to start to introduce, like you say, the 2v2s?
Yeah, no problem. But it's 2v2s, and I would then be the coach floating in a 2v2. I'd say, right, the only time you can find me, you can find any one of your colleagues, they're going to go wide positions. I'm going to stay central. So now what does that give you? 3 options. Okay. So if they spread wide, what's going to happen to the space where in front of me? Oh, that might create more space. So in which case, who are you going to feed with the ball? Perfect. If the boy who's on the left side, or the girl, plays the ball back to the goalkeeper, what options will he or she have as he has a good first touch? Obviously, kids tend to want to be younger age group. They want to always follow the ball. You've got to try to get them to open up. So you just start to say, okay, and it might be, again, because the coach joins in, the coach stays in that central area, he then attracts a player, you then play wide on the opposite side. So receive from one to play to another, or receive from one side to play into the central area where the coach is. That's game appreciation.
Yeah, little sessions like that can start at an early age. That's really useful. Let's have a look. Pre-season plans. Ian Wickens, obviously it's been a challenging last few months, and potentially interest, he says, could have tailed off dramatically for some of his players. I'm experiencing the opposite because players can't wait to get back into it. But how can you keep these younger kids at grassroots levels engaged and motivated?
It's very difficult at the moment for what you just said. If you look at the fact that a lot of the grassroots hasn't got back yet because of the restrictions that we've got on 6 people outdoors, etc., which we should obey because they're not going through the stringent regulations and testing that they are at the pro level. Ultimately, again, if you haven't planned, you're in trouble. Because ultimately, I think the best pre-season is the one that you've planned. It took me 17 years to get the best pre-season I ever thought by asking the players. Wow. 17 years. So I've done 16 pre-seasons, which were fine. But the best, which I've still referred back to, was 17 years on from when I started. And then when I look at it, it was the fact that I included variation, small group practices, small-sided games. When do you introduce the 11v11? When do you do technical? When do you do tactical? Get the players involved. Can we do fitness with the ball? That's a big thing in pre-season. Everybody's something I see them, they're running the players. Can we do it with the ball? Can we be more inventive in terms of getting that fitness level?
Some good takeaways there. Again, pre-season plans. Can you help with how to start a plan? But you've covered that. That's from Ricardo Ribeiro. And essentially, you can engage the players, I guess, and get the players to sort of feedback in terms of how they want to help shape the session. So we talked. Matthew Stock asked about how you manage different, goalkeeper physical attributes when planning defensive set pieces or corners. And I guess that goes back to one of the original questions we had when we looked at player profiling and defending. Yeah. But also, what would the role of your keeper be in a corner situation, for example? What are you asking them to focus on?
What are the strengths? So if I look at, let's give you an example. If you put Shay Given, he knew he was 6'1", would not be looking to come and command in and around 8 yards, but he knew that the players knew that anything within that 5 yards, he would come and deal either catch, or he worked so hard on his punching that if he come under challenge, he learnt to punch with both hands. So you'd say, right, what we need to do then, what did you want, which way do you want to have the one that comes and marks him, steps on the goalkeeper? Which side do you want the defender? Do you want him on the inside or the outside? Again, profiling on that. Mm-hmm. You might have a goalkeeper who, Joe Hart, never wanted anybody in and around him. Anybody came and stood on Joe Hart, leave it to me, I'm not bothered. I'll handle that. Other goalkeepers wanted protection on the inside, on the outside. It's getting to know your players. Edwin Van Der Sar, 6'6" with an unbelievable reach, never had anybody when people came in and around him until we went to Bolton, played Bolton, and you remember Nolan.
Yeah,
the master at pinning the goalkeeper. So I said, what we need then is we need to get a real ugly, horrible defender to help you. So we got Gary Neville and said, what you do is you step between Edwin and Nolan. Your job, as soon as Nolan comes in, Edwin would take a false position and Gary would never use his hands. He would use his chest to take Nolan away from Edwin. That left Edwin to come and deal in front of Nolan, behind him, or even in a central area. And yet before that, he'd never, ever wanted somebody in and around him. So it's getting to know the needs of your goalkeeper to suit the strengths and the attributes they've got, and then link it to your defenders on your profiling.
Yeah, that's obviously something Arsene Wenger never got to grips with up at Bolton, was it? With
or Stoke on the long throw.
Yeah.
I've got just a nice one in the chat here, which is an interesting question from Matt. And he says, would you advocate having 2 goalkeepers in a team to buddy, support, befriend and learn twice as quick together? And he says here that he can't convince parents of the value of 2 goalkeepers. Am I misunderstanding the parent?
No, I think parents, they all want their kids to play. I think what you've got to do is very quickly agree that unless you've got within your 2 goalkeepers somebody who is definitely way ahead of the other one at the time, and that might be because of physical development, or they've actually just turned to goalkeeping and really took to it. I think the understanding I always had with parents was you need 2 goalkeepers. 2 goalkeepers each age level. And if he's doing really well, he might be in a club where we can buy a van and we'll push him up to the next level, in which case your boy. We get a lot of parents at academy level don't like the fact that some do 2 games on, 2 games off. I see the value of saying to parents, look, be honest, from the start of the season, he's going to get a share of games. But what happens, I used to say then, is when you get to Christmas, and we've got the last 3 months, I'll tell you what, whoever deserves to play will play in the big games. Parents will go, okay, that was fair. And ultimately, you're never, ever going to keep everybody happy. But if you had an understanding with the parents and with the goalkeepers, that tended to work better.
Here's one for you, Eric, on that. 2 goalkeepers, both similar standards. You want to keep them both engaged. Obviously, grassroots football, roll on, roll off. What's the harm in bringing on, your sub-keeper and just rotating like you would with any outfield player? I mean, I've never been a keeper myself, but I'm a coach. How disruptive is that to a goalkeeper to be coming on for the last sort of 30 minutes?
Well, I've been there, and I used to hate the fact that if we were going to split the halves, I'd always want to play the first half. Second half, I found it very, very difficult to get into the speed and the tempo of the game. But ultimately, at pre-season, a lot of coaches, managers wanted to do that. They'd play a certain number of first half, second half. I used to try and convince all my managers to say, look, give him 90 minutes, give him 90 minutes. So they end up with 2 games each, whatever. That was always preferred by the goalkeepers. Yeah. Getting that across to the managers. Some managers, Rob, would say, okay, Steele, I get that, no problem at all. The nearer they got to the big decision time when you start the season was not normally where they'd say, do you know what, we've made our mind up. I've got an eye now. Ask my opinion. Like I said, all your coaches listening, you're paid to give opinions. Managers are made to make the decisions. That's why Alex was on the big books. He made massive decisions. And he had a great relationship with his staff that we gave opinions. Who would you play? What do you think we do there? Which system would you go with? And I think it's similar with when you're doing that with your goalkeepers, that you have to turn around and say, okay, this will be my beliefs, but within your beliefs, would that have set your planning for the actual games? Because inevitably, as long as you get near to the end of the pre-season when you're about to kick off, you've got in your mind who's going to be your number one and who's going to be your next 10 players in front of them.
Yeah. No, that's really personally for me, that's really useful. So I've got two good keepers. Trying to keep them both happy is one of the biggest challenges of the season. I'm sure people can relate to it. Okay, Jack Shirley, how did you get the best? This is a good question from Jack. So how did coaches get the best from you, your fellow coaches? So it's not about you just getting the best from your players, but and personally, how did you get the best out of yourself when it came to coaching?
I think the fact that if I actually got response from the players, and that mightn't be actions in terms of how they performed training-wise, game-wise, it was actually getting them to buy into the input of what they wanted. And I think I'm back to it again. I used to get my value. There's three things now I look at it. When I played, that was my enjoyment, Rob. I played as a goalkeeper, and that was winning games, clean sheets, making saves, doing what you had for the team. When I then went to goalkeeping coaching, my total enjoyment and reward was the performance of the goalkeeper, but not just the goalkeeper within the team. When I packed in working with teams, what I'm doing now, and I've done for about the last 10 years, is working with coaches. My reward now is seeing coaches who have gone and done a B, gone and done an A, gone and said, do you know what? I only want to go level 1, level 2. Terrific. I get as much enjoyment and satisfaction from seeing what they've done and stayed at level 2 coaching, or they've gone on to B, or it might be the dad that just wants to help his son on a Saturday morning. That's my reward now as a coach, as a mentor as such. And I think that's what you have to register with yourself, is you'll get your feedback, and that's your reward as to how you enjoy your coaching at various stages.
Yeah, so it all depends on your own personal sort of coaching sort of challenges. James Colbeck, we spoke about this one. What was the difference between Van Der Sar, an experienced pro at the end of his career, versus like David De Gea, so a young pro at the start of his career?
Good point. Obviously, when David came in, 20 years of age, Edwin was 37. We got 3 years extra out of Edwin. There was a total difference on all of the different 5 corners. So physically, David had to work. Edwin, no. He had his frame, his physical. He knew what he needed. So he didn't do any serious weights as such on conditioning. Did a lot of work on the resistance in terms of the machines, the Kaiser machines, core work, rest and relaxation. Asking him how he felt was important. How do you feel Thursday morning? Bit stiff, I'll tell you what then. Do the first hour. And the last bit where I know Rennie and Mick are going to do like a 6v6, but it's going to be geared around a shooting session as well. I'll get Ben Amos or Sam Johnson in to do that. You have a walk in, relax, fine on the physical side. Tactically, Edwin needed to know what was going on. He would ask who we're playing Everton on Saturday, what they do on set pieces, free kicks. We're playing Milan. Who will be the one that could hit from distance? Pirlo. He wanted to know. David, we had to structure everything because he was totally new to the Premier League. And we had to put him on this strength and conditioning program because when he came in at 20, he'd done very little physical conditioning because he'd spent the previous 18 months playing for Atletico Madrid, winning the Europa League, finishing 5th in La Liga. So that there was totally different ways to look at it. We had to show David what the Premier League was about. He'd never seen Rory Delap throw a ball from the actual sideline into the middle of the goal. They don't have many long pain. So we had to prepare him from Tuesday. I'd show him the video. This is what you're going up against. This is what it's like going to West Ham. This is what it's like going to Arsenal. Excuse me. Edwin, no, he knew it. He was experienced. He knew the Premier League. And then, again, helping him then on all the other aspects that go with it. the tactical aspects, how much you gave David. Didn't want to give him too much. Edwin would be the sponge. He would say, no problem. But you give him, I could give him literally 2-minute video. Off you go.
He'd pick it up straight away. He'd just know.
Yeah. David, I'd have to show him on a Tuesday, reiterate on a Thursday, then go and work it.
So I guess it shows the importance of De Gea being able to experience how Van Der Sar worked, to actually be able to be a sponge from him and sort of look at it and say, oh, actually, okay, yeah, this is what I need to be adding to my game. This is where I want to be.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense. Final question that we had in prior to this, Maria Fernandez. So how do you look after yourself as a coach to ensure you can build confidence in the players? Now, I assume she's asking after maybe a fitness, taking pride in your own personal fitness. And
that's a great thing. Coming from the lady coach.
I believe so, yeah.
Well done. I'll tell you what's a good question, and it's something that I often neglect when I do these sort of phone-ins or webinars, is you have to look after yourself physically, mentally. I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done and continue working as I have physically on the coaching side and also on the coach ed side without having a personal fitness. You have to have a pride. If you want to kick footballs at goalkeepers and still be doing it when you're 50, 55, you need to maintain, because we do an awful lot of kicking. If you're a goalkeeping coach, you do an awful lot of the service. Goalkeepers rely upon that service that you give them. Edwin Van Der Sar had to have a warm-up, and if I didn't get it right, oh boy. And that meant I had to be really on song, which meant I had to make sure physically I was in the best condition. Mentally, make sure you don't overdo. I always, and I still preach this now, there must be 20 minutes in every day as a coach. You have your time. You've got kids, you might have family, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. You must have a 20-minute where you sit down and it's your time. And it might be a reflection time with pen and paper or on your iPad. It might be reading a book. It might be catching up with some clips on a video that you wanted. But it's your time, because this game can be all-consuming. Turn your mobile phone off when you come home. People look at me now and they're going, what? Perfect. Why not? You give some family time. Get the balance between family and work. There's times where that phone's still going at 8, 9 o'clock. When do you have a threshold? If they need you and you want to check your messages after you've had 2.5 hours without the phone, do it. People, too much emphasis on these mobile phones now. You need to have a break from them for your family's sake, for your own mind's sake. You see people now, you wonder why they get knocked down walking down the street, knock themselves over because they're constantly on the phone. I think the mobile phone is a terrific asset, but can also be a hindrance.
I suppose you see that with the players now as well, don't you? The fact that in the changing rooms are on their phones probably rather than actually sort of engaging with each other.
Yeah. How many times now do you see it? They go on Twitter or whatever, 10 minutes after the game. They're not even debriefed themselves about the game. Drives coaches mad. So that's why the best coaches bar the phones. Half an hour after, go and do your cool down. Go and do your little debrief with your captain or with your coach. Then you can pick up on your Twitter. You can't. So that's why a lot of the rules have been made within the pro game. I say to kids that actually come along to the sessions, when you get in the car, promise me, and this is kids, Rob, ranging from 8 years of age up to 20 years of age, doesn't make any difference to me. Who picks you up, drops you off? Parents. So when they pick you up, have a rule. Parents don't answer the phone. You can get it if it's an emergency. Kids don't answer your phone. So for 20 minutes, you turn and go, so Dad, how was your day today? You go, oh, by the way, what have you done today? What was the training session? What was the best parts? What did you do well? Yeah. So you have 20 minutes where it's actually some reflection time with your mums, your dads. Might be your brothers picking you up, your sisters.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's no conversation goes on. The conversation shouldn't be via text. You've got to see facial expressions to see how people react. So I'm a big, big believer in saying they're a massive asset, but let's have some, appreciation of mum and dad picking you up. They're dying to know what you've done. And the first thing kids do is they put the phone in front of their face for 25 minutes. I think it's an important part of their learning process.
No, definitely. It's an important one. I'm glad we squeezed that in right at the end. That's all the questions that were submitted in advance. I don't know, James, if we've got any more that have come through on the chat, or if anyone wants to throw a question at Eric quickly. I know we said we wrap it up at 8. But we can probably squeeze in 1 or 2 more, if that's all right, Eric.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, if we've got any quick fire questions, that would be brilliant. But definitely a good note to close on there. allow people to have a bit of an evening.
Didn't you have a trophy you wanted to share as well, Eric?
Oh yeah.
I don't mind. Yeah, if anyone wants to see it. Not too sure how long it'll be before Man U win that again.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my Premier League medal looks like, guys.
Looks lovely.
Yeah. Great days. Great days. Go on, fire away. What we got left?
If anyone has any questions, just please fire them into the chat box.
Best pro I've ever worked with, Cristiano Ronaldo. First in, last out.
Worst pro.
Sorry, Rob, was that a question? Sorry, mate.
Who's the worst pro you ever worked with then?
No, I haven't got one. No, because goalkeepers I work with, we always wanted to work. I never had any problem working with goalkeepers. But yeah, a lot of good players. A lot of best defender I played with, Mark Lawrenson. Never went to ground.
Any players you feel didn't fulfil their potential that you saw as a coach and thought these are going to go to the very top and didn't quite hit their fulfill?
Not really, no. No, they all made a good living in the game, to be fair. There wasn't many that I look back and go, what a waste. You wasted your talent. No, most of them, they've actually got on and had a good career. You know, a good career might be, like I always talk about Lee Camp, who's playing at Birmingham now. I had him at Derby with Mark Poom, Lee Grant, Lee Camp. Now look at Lee Camp. What a career he's had. He's had about 500 games in the Championship. You know, as somebody who you would readily admit, did he have a massive amount of natural talent? No. What did he do? He worked at it. So I'm as proud of him as what I've done with Lee Grant and Mark Poom and all the names that we mentioned tonight. You know, some people have been just good pros. Really enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed.
Any big turning points in your career that you look back and think this is a real turning point for me? I know Peter Taylor mentioned one a few weeks ago that he looks back on Glenn Hoddle gave him an opportunity at England under-21s. Anything that stands out for you?
What, as a player or as a coach?
Either or, that kind of helped shape your life or career.
I like one of the stories. If we actually allowed the cameras on, I've got the famous somebody always asks me, who was your hero? Gordon Banks, 1966 World Cup. Lev Yashin, who was a goalkeeper for Russia. I was lucky enough to go and see Yashin play in the 66 World Cup at Sunderland. Banksy, met him, bless his heart. His funeral was last year. The greatest save ever, which we've all witnessed in 1970 in Mexico from a famous Brazilian striker, Pelé. That was in Guadalajara. And then I fast-tracked my career to coaching, and we're actually opening a new stadium near Guadalajara for Chicharito, who we'd signed. So we obviously got to go to the new stadium. Then the night before, we're going to train. And I always remember it, and I'm looking, and we're driving up, and I'm going, Guadalajara, Banks save against Pelé. This can't be. We're actually at the stadium, which is they're using now for training purposes. So I've now walked on with Edwin Van Der Sar, Thomas Kuzak, and Ben Amos. And I said to the groundsman, because could communicate with them, Spanish, etc. And I actually said to them, I said, the Banks save, which end? So he told me that end. So he sent me, points to the left. So we have a jog down. And by this time, Edwin's looking at me as if to say, what's he up to, Steele, here? So we get down the bottom. And I said to him, I says, guys, you all know the Gordon Banks save from Pelé? Edwin said, oh, everybody knows that. Ben Amos went, oh, Steele, yeah, ball crossed. He's got no chance. He's got to recover. Gets a hand. The ball goes up over the bar. I says, yeah, this is it. This is the goal. We're walking into the goal mouth. This is where he made it. I says, Ben, do me a favour. I says, just bounce a ball in there. I'm going in goal.
Yeah. Rolling back the years.
I says, come on. I says, you are now going to recreate the Pelé header. So he bounces the ball. I go across with my right hand, flicked it out. I'm in heaven. I'm in my own world. What I don't realise is I get up from the ground, guys, and Sir Alex is walking onto the field with all the squad, and they're seeing this daft Geordie goalkeeper diving in the goal mouth, and he shouts down, what are you doing, you mad Geordie? And I explained to the squad why I was diving in the goal when I've got three perfectly fit goalkeepers who should have done it. But it was just unbelievable because it's still in my mind now, and that's what's on my study wall.
Too good a moment to miss. Is it? Once you're there, you got to make the most of it.
Best save of all time. Go on, guys. Is that it? We're done.
Right. I've got a few quick fire ones. So, can you share the story of De Gea's signing, convincing Fergie to sign him?
Yeah. I'd watched him play 17 times live for Spain under 21s, Atletico Madrid, and then we'd got down to 3 people: Neuer, Lloris, or De Gea. And I'd made my mind. I felt it was De Gea who could take us forward. So I said to the gaffer, I said, Gaffer, I says, been through all the process with the chief scout and other people being to see him. I said, we're ready now. He says, okay. I said, but I'll tell you what, it's a big investment. He's a young goalkeeper. Why don't we go and see him? And he went, aye, go on then. Well, he only ever missed 2 games in 27 years. One was for a wedding and one was for a funeral. So I asked him then, would you come? It was in Atletico Madrid, we're playing Valencia. Private plane, flew, got to the stadium, forgot about the fact that the clocks were an hour forward. So we got to the stadium thinking it's 7 o'clock and it was 6. Knocked on the big door for the tickets and everything else. And they looked and went, early, too early, yeah. What did they do? They knew it was Sir Alex. They gave him a private room at the side of the director's box. And they were playing, Man United were playing Scunthorpe in the Carling Cup as it was then. He actually turned around to the Spanish guy and said, you can't get an online feed, can you, for And the guy went, oh, no, not possible. So he was asking for that, and he ended up in his own private room. We then go out, I watched the warm-up, and after 67 minutes, there's a ball come through, and the striker for Valencia gets through, hits this ball right across David, and you're thinking goal. And his right hand just comes out from nowhere, that massive reach he had, gets the parry, goes for a corner. So Alex says, Steele, he's my boy. I've seen enough.
Good man.
I said, okay, that was it. And it was then agreed. Deal was done with Atletico in the January, and he literally came the day after he'd won the under-21s of Spain. And that was him signing. And that was the start of the journey. And he's now coming up to 400 games for Man United. He'd be 30 years of age in November. Not bad for 17 million. Despite his little blip at the moment in the form, just look at what he's done. He's come up to 400 games, and he's won 4 Player of the Years, 5 PFA teams. He's won everything, apart from the Champions League.
You don't have a record like with a record like that, you can't say someone's not world class, can you? I mean,
exactly. So at the moment, 1 or 2 have jumped ahead of him. So it's quick fire. James, Edison, and Alisson would be ahead of him at the moment on consistent form. But let Schwarzenegger, David will be back. Have faith.
Right, I've got one more question I'm gonna ask, because I don't want to keep you much longer, and this is going to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Probably something I was a young goalkeeper myself. I can certainly relate to letting quite a lot of goals. Daniel says, a grassroots keeper who takes letting in goals to heart for an under-11s team. Any advice? Bless
his heart. Keep playing. I played for under-11s before I joined Wallsend Boys Club, and I remember coming home one day. We used to get beat 8-1, 10-2. I came home one day and my dad said, why are you so happy? What's up, son? I said, we drew 7-all. I was in my absolute element that we got a draw. What he has to do is this. Make sure he looks at his performance and not the result, which is very difficult at that age. But just to get somebody like his dad or his coach to say, how many saves did you make today? How many back passes did you deal with? What was your communication like? And get somebody to ask him what he did within the game instead of the result. And that way, he'll turn performance into improvement, which eventually, hopefully, will get him into a winning mode.
I guess he can switch into a positive as well. The fact that at least he's been kept busy every week, so he can then work on his own game, can't he? Rather than his team winning 8-0 and him not having a touch.
Exactly. There you go.
So you can tell I've managed a few teams that have conceded a few goals here and there. So, James, should we bring that to an end then with Eric?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And just want to say a massive thank you to Eric for giving up his time this evening to join us. We've had a lot of comments in the comment section saying, thank you very much for the great responses. I know you probably won't have been seeing these as you've been answering them, but I think having a fascinating insight that's been very much appreciated. And for those that might want to watch back, we will be sharing this as a recording, so keep an eye out for that, so you can watch back. The only other thing I just wanted to say, Rob, maybe just a quick opportunity for you to mention Sporting Connect and why that might be valuable to coaches in Surrey.
Oh yeah, no, cheers for the plug, James. But everyone's been on the call long enough, so they don't want to hear too much more from me. But do check out the website. We launched it, a few months ago with in partnership with Surrey FA, Sporting Connect. Really great to be able to stay connected with the latest grassroots coaching jobs, but also professional jobs in the game. So do check it out. And I hope you enjoyed this, the second session webinar we've done. We look forward to bringing a few more as well, James, so we'll work on those. And once again, Eric, I know we worked together 2 years ago on a similar sort of seminar, but no, it's been brilliant, and really appreciate you giving up the time tonight. And hopefully coaches of all levels that have been on the call can take away some real valuable insight all ready for the pre-season and to go again.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe. Good luck, coaches.